Hello, everyone, and welcome to our November 2022 NATS chat. I am so thrilled to have two people here with me. My co-moderator, Dr. Nick Klein, has agreed to help facilitate this conversation today with the fabulous Dr. Angelica Nair. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Kari. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick.
And of course, I always want to thank Inside View Press for sponsoring our NATS chat. So thank you to them. So as we begin, we're going to go into talking about the tongue, Angelica, and you're going to help teach us some new and wonderful things that you've learned from your research. We're looking forward to discussing that. Tell us a little bit of the beyond the bio. Tell us a little about you that we wouldn't read in your bio that helps to share with us how you've come to do this work that you're doing now, how you've become who you are.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Where shall I begin, right? That's always the question here. I think on one side, I think I'm blessed to have grown up in a family where a grandfather started playing already the organ when he was 12. And back then that meant he played the organ 5 times a day in the church because there were more masses along the day. And so that's what I grew up in, and it was normal, to come together on the farm and to sing at every occasion. Harmonizing was, sure, you do that, right? All the folks tunes and everything. So music was always part of my life, and I guess that's part of it. And the other thing is, my grandfather was extremely gifted. He always wanted to study music, but he wasn't allowed to because he was the first born son, so he had to take over the farm. I'm the first one who did that, right? And I guess that's all that kindled everything in me, that music is my life, and singing was just there, and I knew, okay, there's more to it, and so.
And this was in Austria, Angelica?
This was in Austria, yes.
In Austria. And did you say, were you the first to go to college then in your family?
Not to college, but to actually then study music, to become a professional musician. Everyone, it was very normal that my mom and everybody, learned an instrument, it doesn't matter, the guitar or whatever it was, right? Clarinet, all those difficult instruments. My grandfather played almost everything. And I played the flute also, and in the conservatory, for instance, I did that as well. But yeah, but nobody really became a professional musician. So yeah. I was the first who actually said, okay, I'm going to do that.
Your grandfather must be so proud, must have been very proud of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so special. So take us up to a little bit of what prompted you to write the book. Like, what was going on for you? Was there a research article you came across that you thought, wow, this is interesting, and it led you down a path? Or tell us what led you.
Really, yeah. I would have never thought that I'm writing a book. Never, ever in my entire life. But all the things that I learned along my own study, as a singer, as a professional, as a teacher, and then getting even more into research, I thought, okay, at some point this has to be put down so I can share that with everyone, what I think helped me so tremendously, and I want to make that available, and so that's actually what led me to finally then write the book. Exactly.
Yes, my publisher, Plural Publishing, who I'm also with, would not be pleased if I were not
sharing. You're both authors of Plural.
And there is, if they do Plural 2020 right now, they will be able to get a discount off of the purchase of this book through the publisher. So there you go. Yeah, isn't it just amazing when you see it?
Gosh, I mean, can you believe it? I mean, when you held your book and your fantastic book also in your hand, right? I mean,
I have to
You
tell you,
wrote this.
this is very funny, actually. I was on with Alan Henderson at the time on it. We had just finished a NATS chat during COVID. We had just finished and it arrived and I said, oh, it's here, stay. And I ran down to the box at my front door and I opened it up and he got to witness my utter disappointment by how small my book was. I was like, all this work and this is how it just seemed so small to me. And I was so disappointed. Anyway, back to your book. Thank you for letting me share that ridiculous story. But what specifically with the tongue? What led you there?
Yeah, I mean, it started, actually, it was leading into, starting with the mandible, everything that is happening around it. But then at the end, okay, we're changing so many things around it. And literally, we have the expression of, I have a knot in my tongue, right? There's so much going on. What is it doing? So, and we don't know anything about it. And we can't see it. I mean, we always have the big challenge in voice that we can't see our instrument, right? And this is one of it, even though supposedly we see it through the mirror, but this is not even close to what the tongue is doing. And so the more insight you can get, the better. And I'm an extremely visual person, so yes, let's get there and get to know what the tongue is actually doing. Everyone is talking about it. It's so crucial, but you don't get any more information other than that.
Okay,
It's
I
important
love
to pay attention. Okay, to what? Yes.
So on our way to this tongue and ultrasound, let's briefly, because I know once we get there and land there, between Nick and I and our attendees today, we're going to live there. But on our way there, let's briefly talk about the jaw, because you talk about that quite a bit, and you call it the LMM, lower.
The little maneuver, right? Because
Sure.
that was a primarily research that we did. This was still with Gareth, actually, that we started out with, that he already started in his book a little bit, and so we actually said, okay, let's get deeper into all that. And I think it's important because also, again, the movement of the jaw, what do we see? It seems like we're dropping it. We're almost pushing it down. Sometimes we use the word get the jaw down, right? And down means actually more of a two, just up and down, but it actually is very flexible. And when we think about it, if we wouldn't have muscles around it, this is the only joint here that is not a joint that helps in itself. So if we wouldn't have muscles around it that would contract and keep the jaw up, it would, this would be this, comic film, right? That we have there. So that's one thing, because it's, and we also know, we're finally including, the psychological part also, how crucial the jaw is in terms of nerves, in terms of anxiety and everything. Where do we start? We clench here, right? So there's lots going on. And so I loved finally to see how the jaw works, how it translates along. And if you don't mind, I'm sharing that movement. Let me see. So I need to go to sharing, right?
Yeah.
And then you guys should see.
Yes.
This, right? Is that now visible, right? Okay.
Yes.
Good. Okay, awesome. So yes, so that's what I'm talking about. The jaw here, that's the joint, the temporomandibular joint, right, and the condyle function. And the interesting thing here is, as you can see, and we can all put our fingers on the jaw, right? When we move on and when we talk, and we don't need to move the jaw much, and we can still talk, and there's not much movement going on. It pretty much stays in that hinge in there, right? Mm-hmm. But then when we sing, we need to actually move and open it up. And the interesting thing is it moves along here. in this nice little as a wavy shape here, and it moves down and it translates, it really glides. And we know, jaw tension, or when someone has, almost clenching and it click, that is the disc in between, yeah, that doesn't move, that stops it. And then it would pop over it once you can open it. This is sometimes that click that some students really come into. Or, yeah.
That's a great
so
visual.
Yeah, I love that too. And it's not like we always see, with other things. I have here my skull here in the back. When we see that, it's not going down, it translates, right? And it means when I have a rigid body, that it cannot go down when it translates, but it rotates actually back, which means the front of the mandible goes actually closer to my larynx, because that translates. This is. But when I think you need to drop it, I get tense here.
Right.
Then I push it down, right? And that's why I think it is so important to actually do that. And I have a couple things that you can do here, with loosening, because we can really put pencil in here, right? And as you can see here in the image, we have these huge muscles around it, right? And they actually are contracting most of the time, because like I said before, they need to keep the jaw up. So we need to learn how can we let go and let that mechanism just start naturally. Most of the time, we just need to let go.
I'm wondering, Angelica, if this would be a good opportunity for you to talk us through maybe some of the trigger points for the jaw, and how to find some release.
Oh gosh, yes, love to. Let me see if I can. Okay, here they are. So I love to do those no matter what, right? Not just when I see I'm tense here. I love to do that when I have to do a lot of desk work and to get. So just trigger points to me is also really getting something triggered, right? Say, do I find here some tension? And what I also learned is not to just stimulate constantly the trigger point, like with masseter, for instance. So we find the corner of the jaw, right, that ramus here, and then we just move in. And then you find a point that sort of hurts, but also relaxes you at the same time. And when we find that, actually keep on it, not just stimulating, keep on it as much as you can bear, because then the body learns to say, there's, okay, I may need to let go, right? Yeah. I used to think to say, okay, stimulate, let go, stimulate, let go, stimulate, let go. But I learned then from a physiotherapist and osteopath that, they learned that the brain kind of says, okay, there's pain, but then you let go and say, okay, there's no pain. Oh, there's pain, no pain. Yeah, what is it now, right? So when you keep on it and you keep that trigger still constant, then the pain says, okay, there's pain, I need to maybe let go. So that's something that I just learned also. So there are a couple of those underneath. You can actually move around. I think it's also, you don't need to necessarily be very pinpointed. And lots of people find it then, oh yeah, here I have it, right? And really get in there. And if you're up to it, get from both sides. Get also inside, get along there. This is, oh my gosh, it really hurts sometimes, right? Then I know, okay, I'm really stressed.
And Angelica, I would say, at least here in the States, unless you are a speech therapist or a massage therapist, we should not be putting our fingers in our students' mouths to do any of this work. We should show them how to do it themselves.
Thank you, Kari. Yes. We may ask for permission. So it's interesting. This, by the way, what's his name again? Walt Fritz, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Walt, he is great, right? I love him. And I mean, he, for instance, he can just go because he's a therapist. Yes.
That's right.
But we may ask for permission, you know, and I may guide my students to say, if are you up to it, right? Take a glove and go in, right? And say, okay, do this or that. They do that sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
they're just along the way. So and also I just one note to that. So when we work here, there's going to be lots of saliva because we have, of course, the glands here around and so on, which is also good, you know, to really get everything going.
Talk about that triangle, number 6.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. Again, this is this triangle right underneath. And interesting enough, this is the floor of the tongue, right? So here's another image to envision, which was to me also. So, okay, I just talked about not dropping the jaw, but letting it rotate, which means that comes closer now. So this has something to do also now underneath. If I keep tense here, yeah, and doesn't allow that to sort of, okay, this needs to come closer. I need to, yeah, maybe not nice, right? And beautiful. When the older we get, the more we see. But anyways, really let that go. So this is the floor of the tongue. Calm that together. Maybe that is something, sometimes it's helpful to really just massage it here. I found it helpful because then you feel, am I tense here? Am I blocking something? Is that part of my blocking that I don't let the jaw actually come there? Because as we know, it just affects everything. It's this domino effect that, of course, it goes into the larynx, right?
So what you really want us to know about the jaw is because the muscles are in activity to keep the jaw closed, that
yes,
in order to sing, we have to open our mouth. So being attentive to these muscles of the jaw to release tension.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I like the image of like a warm towel. We get now into the season where we actually like to imagine that, right? When you put a warm towel on there, kind of you let go.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment you let go, our body actually knows what it needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then the rotation starts naturally. Then we have this yawn that we always talk about, right? Then we go from the outside actually into the inner muscles, right? And then we start already getting into the tongue muscles, etc. It has an effect. And I always like to think when I know that they contract for most of the time. So, okay, I don't need to think of being active here. I need to think of more letting them go.
Okay. So as we move toward the tongue, let's spend a few minutes in consonant resonance. And I know we're not taking a deep dive, obviously, everyone, but the book goes into it in more detail. But consonant resonance is a big part of your work, I see.
Yeah.
So
yes.
let's introduce that to us.
Yes. Consonants I found even in my own study. You know, everyone wants you to be crisp in your diction and everything, but I have not had teachers who really paid very much attention to the consonants. In terms of course, I mean, I'm going overboard with it, right? I'm the complete opposite. But to really say, okay, let's really get that T or so. Most of the time it was a hindrance, right? Because of course in singing, we are sustaining with the melodies that we have, with the values of the notes, etc. The composer dictates already sustaining on the vowels. So we are there, and that's the focus, of course. And this is not to say this is bad, but that's great. And so, but I also found out then that, okay, and maybe I just show that one part where you can see actually I have a phrase of a piece, right, that I did in my research, and where you can see actually when you sing and speak the same phrase, how much the consonants actually take from that. And I'm just going to show that real quick. So you all can see that. So it's so spiriti foco che laurea in fermata, right? And it's sung and spoken. So interestingly enough, this was almost equal in terms of 14 consonants and vowels. And they are almost the same length when you speak them. But then we sing, and we are really singing over 80% on the vowels, right? But the interesting thing here is that the consonants are the same, just a tad sometimes more, but almost the same speed. So they're very quick. And when we don't know what to do with the consonants, when we don't know what to do with the tongue, when we don't have the same resonance going from one vowel to the other, and in between we don't have now a continuity of that, we sort of put a stop in there, and all of a sudden everything else suffers from it. And until we recover from that, it takes a while, right? And my big go-to story is warm up. Right? We warm up, and it's a glorious voice, particularly when you go through a conservatory or whatever. You hear those warm-ups, those glorious voices, and then you hear the same voice later singing something, and all of a sudden the entire voice is not here anymore because of the consonants that take away that resonance. And I think we know now more through spectrography, etc., that they truly have resonance, and we can create resonance, ideal consonant resonance for good diction, projection in bad acoustics, and so that's why I think that's pretty much, and that's it's tying already into what to do. So how to create the consonants and how to work with our chambers within the vocal tract in order to create the resonance chambers for every consonant, not just vowels.
Nick, did you have any questions or okay? So Angelica, with regards to consonants, can you give a demonstration of how you approach what you've learned?
Okay. Yes. I for instance, when I sing, yeah, just aka, the k is, for instance, a voiceless consonant. Particularly the voiceless consonants, right, are really the critical one. And so when I ka, or when I start out with so I'm doing it slow motion. So I can create resonance within it. What I do is I try to use the resonance that I'm setting up in the vowel already to take as much into my consonant to continue then also. This, of course, also concerns the jaw. Am I using the jaw to create the consonant? And now we go into the difference of speech and singing, because I'm open, so I create more space in my mouth. So my tongue needs to do much, much more work. When I just say k, k, the tongue doesn't need to move a lot. So do you think it may be good to show that on an ultrasound?
Yes, and let's just be clear, right now we're talking classical aesthetic.
At the very moment, yeah.
Yes, and is your book more focused on classical aesthetic and articulation concerns?
Yes, so primarily, yes, most definitely. I am a classical singer, even though I do teach other styles too. Though I'm not saying I'm the expert then, because for the details go to those who really know the performance practices, etc. But I can get students into direction to that. And yes, I am mainly classical, because with classical, and I say non-amplified singing, right, where we need to project more,
Yes.
Which means we need to create as much resonance as possible. So therefore, we need to also excite more openness, which means we need to do much, much more work. So we go from the one extreme, from the one end of the spectrum, really to the extreme there. And then along the way, even though I may not need as much opening in musical theater or whatever, because I'm amplified, right? But I still work with the chambers. The principle, the acoustic principle, is still the same. It may not be as much in terms of work, but it's still there.
Okay.
And I need the same agility. So in classical, I need to excite it even more. So this is like, you know, I want I need to stretch something in sports, right? I don't want to run a marathon, but at the same time, I need to warm it up and be as agile with my muscles to also do that, right? To actually sustain that. Maybe that's a good analogy to go there. Yeah, so that's, and I also say, like I said, with speech and singing, actors. That's what I do in the book too. I don't just see resonance, consonant resonance, or resonance in the voice for singing, it's also for speaking. And I think it's even crucial nowadays that we don't talk much anymore, we chat, right? In terms of really writing. And I see less and less articulation, less and less movement of articulators. And that's like a muscle, you know, that you never use, and then all of a sudden you don't know what to do with it because it's really tense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did that?
That's wonderful. Yeah. And are you going to, I have a couple more follow-up
Yes.
questions, but did you want to show us?
Yes, the ultrasound, right?
Yeah, if you're, yes.
Finally, right? Okay.
And while she's getting set up, there is a question box, everyone. So if you have questions, it'll come to me and then I will ask. So please don't hesitate.
So, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, here it is. So to everyone, where my mouse is, right? Is this the right side to you guys also?
Yes.
Okay, so the right side is the tip of the tongue, and the left side is the back of the tongue. And what you see is actually, you see me from that profile perspective. The tip of the tongue on the right side, the back of the tongue on the left side. I will maybe also give an orientation that may help in that regard, right? So you guys, this is that. So you can see exactly this. Just to orient yourself, you see what we see in the ultrasound is, of course, just that now. Here we go. Right?
Okay.
The movement of the tongue. That's to orient everybody. You see the reflection on the surface of the tongue, and now I'm going to show you how I actually gonna drink something, because our primary purpose is not articulating, but actually moving food and liquid, right? This is our survival. And the interesting thing is, so you will see the bolus then, I will hold it and then slowly drink.
Okay. So you're going to hold the water in your mouth. There we go. Yep. And then there we go. So cool.
Yes. It is, let me tell you, I can't get tired of this.
No, it's true.
I'm doing this for so long. Oh my gosh. And as you can see, it's very agile the entire time when I talk, right? It moves, it moves, it moves. It makes so many movements and shapes. And we know, for instance, when I now turn my transducer, you can see me from the front.
Ah, got it.
And this is what we always talk about, the group, right? Now I talk, for instance, right? And you see how the tongue actually moves and how much there is going on the entire time. And this is just a slice that we see. But this concerns the entire surface of the tongue, yeah? Everything that you see in terms of change, of waves, etc., all those things, and they're very, very fast, by the way. As you can see, I have 48 frames per second at the moment, and you can get even faster because for African clicks, you need close to 100, actually. So, for instance, when I go back in slow motion, so yes, how much movement there is actually in there, and how smooth all that is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm showing that because it's so crucial, since it concerns everything I do. If I'm not moving anything and I barely do something, it moves very minimal, right? And then I can say, all of a sudden we saw how it elongates, right? How we create more space in the oral cavity, and then I can create really consonant resonance, and that's the difference here.
So my question, when you're demonstrating like the k, I am constantly cueing for what I call a liquid tongue, and
right.
So when I don't want to hear too much of a k that's done what I perceive as with a lot of tension. So is there a way to achieve this consonant resonance without creating more tension? I assume that's the hope.
Yes. And here we go into actually all the attributes that we know from the tongue. It's a hydrostat. I think that's one of the biggest thing that we need to know about the tongue. And that means that, my beautiful pink tongue, it means that that musculature organ that we have here has a volume, and oops, and now I,
Oh no.
okay, that was that. I have another one. It keeps the volume the same no matter how I move it. So I'm working with the same volume, and I think I'm just going here on an assumption right now. So that would sound more tense, right?
Do that again. Sorry, let me watch. Will you do that?
So when I try to move the tongue and I try to sort of say, okay, this is like I'm moving somewhere and I want to get up. So I lean on a table, for instance, and then I push myself up. When I would do that with the tongue, it means that I'm locking in part of the tongue, part of the muscles, and then I'm trying to push part of another part of the tongue up. But the tongue is the only musculature organ in our body that can retract and extend at the same time, which also means that it keeps its skeletal support, actually, because of that muscle structure that it has. It gives itself support. If I put the support on something, on a bone surface, on the teeth or whatever, and then I think I need that to get it up, then I'm locking it in and don't allow the rest of the tongue to move. Because every movement is, pardon me, accompanied by deformation. So I don't allow the deformation to happen the moment I lock something in, which is why I need to let that musculature organ sort of alone and do its dance. If the tip moves, the rest need to move.
Mm-hmm.
If the back moves, the front need to move. To make things even harder, it can move in opposite direction, like I said. It can do both. So if I retract the tip of the tongue, I can elongate the back.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can come together. And that is what I do not allow the moment I start locking it in.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes hard. And
So
that is what I find in consonants most often.
So you're encouraging flexibility.
Yes. And that's also why I go to the extreme side of the other end of the spectrum of, to say I get complete consonant resonance like I would need in classical singing to have good flexibility. Let's overdo it for now. Yeah. But the moment I have that, then I will use that also when I'm not as open.
Mm-hmm. We have a great question here. Let me ask it. Some people have TMJ trauma.
Yeah.
It's not like the question. Nick, is the question opening fully on your end?
No, I'm not seeing a question at all.
Ah, okay. Viviana, can you, I'm, for some reason, I'm not able to. Oh, there we go. Hang on, I got it. Some people have TMJ from orthodontics or tooth extraction or physical injury and do not or cannot comfortably release to make the LMM. How do you modify or otherwise address this issue? Great question, Viviana. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes. And you know, it is actually that from dentistry, you know, that I got more information from there because they are the first that people go to when they have TMJ problems.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to do is I always found that showing them the mechanism like we did earlier, right? To say not to get into the habit of pushing it down. I need to get it open. So really sort of the physiology to get them this visual, right? That image. I like to use that to get flexibility in there. Yeah. Because that helps them to sort of not be too extreme in their movement. But of course, everything with caution, right? Sometimes it truly helps to put something warm on there so they get relaxed. Here's the other thing that I like very much. And I was hunting and hunting and hunting, and at some point on Atlanta airport, I found it. And now I found a different one, which is even more powerful. It's this. Put it on. Massage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. A muscle in motion cannot contract. And the moment I do that, I mean, this is all everyone knows, and oh, that's so nice, right? And then you just let go, right? And it would be great if we would be allowed to novocaine people because they would just let go. That would be great to do something of that sort. But I know I'm not doing it. Please, disclaimer, I'm not doing it.
Is there anything particular about that device you were just showing us that you said that you looked and looked, you found it at the Atlanta airport?
Yes, because it has those three things, right?
Okay.
If I go just, I mean, there are some that have just one pointed, right? But I like that one because I can sort of go around, you know, here in that corner, right? So I can either go in here and do it, and I have 2 points that I'm touching then on, right? Or I can go underneath and really touch more points on it. That's why I like the 3-1.
And what brand is that? Because I'm sure I'll get asked. And now Po. Okay, mini massage.
Yeah.
I'll type it
There
in.
is one, like the one that I actually found in Atlanta was this one, right? But this is not as powerful. I like the strength of this one.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get it on Amazon, I think. Yeah.
You know what's interesting is interesting. When I have students explore, you know, I can tell that they've got a little more contraction going on in the jaw than I'd like. Some people actually even find that temporalis, which of course is one of the primary closers, not that many people, but I always go more in the masseter area or internal pterygoid. But the temporalis, some people really find as extraordinary relief.
Yes. Oh, Kari, yes. This was one of the trigger points that I had when you go above it, right? And you massage and then you fan out because it's really this fan muscle.
Right.
And it is the temporalis is responsible for getting the jaw up.
Yes. So
here's the other thing. Even going in the back.
The
even in the back, the suboccipital muscles underneath the short neck muscles. I go in there with that. And this is just a small movement. When we feel our muscles, my experience is that everything underneath is already very tense. When we feel it on the outside, the larger muscles are already then tense. So that's why I love to go very minimal and small.
Now with the temporalis, I've always, in order to help them find a strong point, is I'll have them grip their, and then they can feel that contraction. But I'm seeing you start the temporalis.
I start here, yes. I start right above it, again, exactly above the temporomandibular joint. Exactly. There's this, you go underneath, and that is where the connection, the fascia starts, right? And then I like to stroke that out. Then I have them get it triggered here and then stroke it up.
Okay. Okay.
And at the same time, feel already how it, oh yeah, it relaxes. I always feel like, oh yes, inside going down into the tongue. So, oh yeah. Everyone likes to go to the hairdresser, right? Because when they wash your hair.
That's true. Nick, do you want to lead us through a couple questions? Not to put you on the spot.
No worries. So anecdotally, I also have a lot of my students that find a lot more release with the temporalis massage compared to masseter or any of the other kind of trigger points. And then also some massage. I have a dual lacrosse ball tool that I use for some pressure back on the suboccipital area to find a lot of release in there, which my students really enjoy. Most of my questions, Kari, actually have to do kind of with the tongue moving forward kind of in our plan. So I'm wondering if we want to maybe transition there first and then go to the questions, or if we want me to ask some questions that take us in.
Perfect. B.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Angelica, you mentioned briefly already the tongue groove, which you showed us on your ultrasound. And I have your book and I love your book. There is a lot of talk about the tongue groove and how it's used for timbre and color and things like that. I'm wondering if you found any acoustic benefits to that tongue groove, since a lot of other pedagogy sources have advocated against that tongue groove for a number of years.
Right. Oh gosh, yes, that's really long. It goes way back with the discussion about groove or no groove. Yeah, so I think in general, we need to, I like to kind of start, we have the two chambers. We have the front chamber in the mouth and we have the back chamber in the pharyngeal. I'm gonna stay very simple. And what I do like is, what I'm showing here is.
We're not seeing anything yet, just so you know. We're not seeing.
Okay. Yes. So here we go. So we have all those resonance chambers, right? Oral, pharyngeal, and so forth that we're working with. And pardon me. The thing is, as you can see, I mentioned earlier on, the tongue can move in opposite direction, front, back, etc., because it has external and internal, extrinsic and intrinsic muscles. it creates all those incredible shapes that you can see there. And Stone, the leading one, and speech language pathologist, was the one that really started that research. And it is crucial in terms of how our airflow, is guided for consonants, right? It's also crucial in terms of how large is the chamber. And to also remind ourselves, we are three-dimensional in here. We think, most of the time we think two-dimensional, right? We are three-dimensional. And all of that, how something resonates and reflects, has an effect of the on the resonance and the timbre. And that's how we can also manipulate it, right? And depending on what I do, I filter. As we know, we do filter the harmonics, and the tongue is filtering in or dampening or whatever, right? So here in this kind, I want to show this one, that we have all those resonances that we can filter. I, of course, here focus here on consonants in this case, but depending on if I have a groove or no groove, that's why I want to show this one, even though it's a consonant at the very moment, it changes of what is filtered in and what not, right? The lower frequencies in particular, because depending on how the two chambers interact with each other, they're creating either anti-resonances or not. And depending on what I want, this is how I'm going to filter. So, and that is why the groove, and I want to add something also. Sometimes maybe we need to also consider, of course, the size of the tongue of each person, right? Of how much and what that looks like, of course. But it is most of the time we know that the groove in the front, and that sometimes even is shown already in Appleman, for instance, who was one of the first one who did all those images back then, right? Yes. That it is acoustically important. I may probably show best, because you mentioned the controversy also, because I did the research in terms of belting, right? And what we do want to do in belting is filter in those higher frequencies, right? Mm-hmm. And so can you see that here? Yes. Okay, here we go. And we know that is this. So if I don't have a groove in the front and I go more into an E, which is then an E, the more I get out of a groove in the front and I go more into an E direction, we know that already just theoretically that E has the frequencies that we want in belting, that metallic thing, right? Those characteristics in there. Interestingly, though, the tongue still creates a groove in the back, for instance, when you allow it to work. And this is my example of a belter, of a professional belter. And again, I say it's F5, and everyone will say that's not a usual belt that we will hear on stage. That is correct. But again, it's on the other side of the end of the spectrum to show this person needs to do even more work to filter that in. You can see the movement even better at that pitch. So if I want that, then I want that quality, then I don't have a groove. So what you will see is at the end, you will see that this person gets up here and creates a groove in the back in order to filter in the higher frequencies. So the more I get out of that, so I can show that also then on an ultrasound. The more I get out of that, the brighter it becomes. So I think, and I am on purpose not saying you have to have a groove or not. It's a, what do you want? So if I want that, then it is necessary to get some groove in there acoustically.
So it's a palette, it's an aesthetic choice, one of the color palettes from which to draw, should you choose.
Exactly. So what do I need? Do I need the phonetics here, right? Do I need an ah more of that? Well, then I need to go more into that direction. And that is what I found with the movement of the tongue, the lowering of the front part of the depression of the front part of the tongue, right? For the ah. And this is then starting to create a groove in the front also. Do I need a son? Do I need a father? What do I need? And that changes that. From what perspective do I come from? Do I come from a phonetic perspective? Do I come from a temporal perspective? And I also think, yeah,
go ahead.
No, I also think I can see an E, for instance, stylistically. I can see an E phonetically, and I can see an E as intensity. I can also get more into that and say it becomes louder when I get more into this direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think it has so many attributes, everything, you know. So.
Well, and to your earlier point, we certainly don't want rigidity, even if you are making a stylistic choice or an aesthetic choice, that a groove might help. We don't want it done with rigidity.
Exactly. Thank you, Kari. And I think it's also, in my experience, sometimes things form and happen and are created because of a deficiency. So, or ideally avoid creating or not to create a problem to solve a problem. So it may be a different issue, but it may not be that this is a question of groove or no groove or whatever. But in order to avoid a different problem, I'm doing no groove. But am I really solving that problem? No, I'm adding another problem.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. We're having one question. Did I send the wrong code for plural? Was it plural 2020? Will that still work?
Yes, I think that.
Okay. I've been told it's not working, so we'll have to figure that out another time and make sure that.
Plural 20, just 120.
Sorry. Okay. Plurals. There you go, Erin. Hopefully that resolves that. Plural 20. And she also was thanking you for your excellent demonstration. And yes, that worked. Good. Good. All right. We've got a few more minutes. If anybody else wants to ask questions, and I will type this correct code here. We have one.
I'm also happy to show more on the ultrasound if people want to and discuss anything. I'm happy to do anything. You know.
What an amazing opportunity. My head wants to erupt. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we have ultrasound. Nick, what do we want to see? What do we want to see?
Okay.
I'm wondering, that's kind of where I was going to go, Angelica, if you could show us, because I have your book open to a section on vowels and how the front of the tongue versus the back of the tongue and the tongue height within the mouth changes the acoustic aspect of it, and we need to modify.
I hope that soon the paper is going to come out of that. And this is also my research, the von Loren research, actually, which was on hold due to the pandemic. But yes, that's a big thing. One mind-blowing thing that I found out is, as we all know, I mean, modifying, how do we get up there, especially high voices, right, etc. Always difficult on so many levels to even wrap your mind around the concept of it. But I think it's also great that we call it modifying. And how do we do it with the E vowel, for instance? I like to always use the E vowel because that's difficult, right? And it is interesting that it actually does show various things, and I'm gonna I have to share again, right? So here we go. Okay. So when I go here, it stays pretty much steady, right? It moves. Please note that it still moves, right? So I'm not kind of that it doesn't move, because again, we have, I think I'm saying this and stressing it because yes, we want things lower, but we don't want to lock it in. There's still movement, right? So it doesn't, it's also kind of, it's kind of this military thing. Stand still. We can't stand still and not move. We will always move even though we stand still. And so there is some movement going on. But what is really interesting, so see if I can do that. It's already 10 o'clock on my end, so it's really late.
Let's start.
So when I sing E, right, and I started on the C 5 here, right? There was lots of movement, right? And I hope you all still heard E, right? I started out on E, and as you can see, I am contracting, right? Let me see if I can go back there. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm starting up. Wait. Yes, almost there. Here, I start. E, retraction of the tip of the tongue, elongation of the rest of the tongue. But as we know, if I stay with E and I would sing up there and I would keep exactly the same shape, which means I'm filtering exactly those frequencies, as we know, those formants that we have, and I keep them steady and I move with the pitch frequency, this is going to be a disaster. I can muscle through it, yes, but we modify. And we all know we need to find what is our modifier, which direction, where is it, in which vicinity. In mine, it's going more to ah when I go up there, right? And it is interesting that we are really modifying. I'm thinking of, okay, I give an ah in there and allowing the tongue then to move. And the higher I get, it's not just moving a little bit, but it is literally starting, I'm being very slow, because it will then almost, yes, here, you see what it does? I'm going da, 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 and then I go back down. It's shaped an ah in there and goes back to the E. I'm not going to the E. If I would start with E and go to ah, you would hear an ah, but we don't want to hear an ah.
Could you do that? It muted you when you sang, except when you did it lower. Would you try it one more time?
Okay, let me see if I can go back a little bit more, right?
Okay.
That it doesn't mute me, right? I hope. Was that better to hear?
Yes. Yeah, we got more of it. Yes, thank you.
Yes. So, and it did the same thing, right? I started out with the E again, right? That is the top of the scale. And it was ba ba. It just did it. I was not consciously going from E. It did not sing E, ah, E. Right. Yeah, I did not do that.
But you have trained yourself to migrate that vowel. But somebody just asked, is it modifying the vowel or is it finding another shape for the E vowel?
That's exactly that. Thank you for that question. That gets on the point. It is really modifying it. And what I like to guide here is say, okay, you have that E vowel. So imagine now around that E vowel that you are kind of modifying in, it's a shape, adding that ah shape, which I think triggers that I give the freedom to say, I sing an E, but I modify with the ah. guide the voice with the ah while I actually have a phoneme, right? Because the ah would really put the illusion away. Then I would not, I start with the illusion, I then modify to make the transition happening, and then I go back again. And we still hear the E.
Mm-hmm.
Perception, a big part, right?
It is, isn't it? And then semantics on top of that.
Oh.
Yeah. Let me ask this question, Angelica. Am I correct in thinking that even slight differences in tongue positioning could affect how we perceive a voice categorization for a singer?
Thank you for that question. Yes. I think we have so much more to learn in that regard. It's also, I think, categorization. Because why is it, for instance? I mean, of course, with younger singers, anyways, because there's still things growing and happening and forming, right? But that you can't say what this voice is going to become, right? But a lot of times it needs some time that we actually can say which direction is this voice actually going, and is it because the anatomy, of course, I'm sure this is part of it. I suppose this is part of it, right? But is it also that now how we use things, how we learned to actually consciously, directly, how to move the tongue, right? And therefore shape things. I think it's also the degree of style, right? What is now the actual belt? What do we categorize as belt? So I think it may have a role in that.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a few favorite tongue release exercises or stretches?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes, so many. And they are also, again, hurtful. I'm sorry to say. Now, what I really like to really get hands on with the tongue. But it also starts already chewing on it. Yeah, really get all of it. With the molars also, the entire tongue, because I think that's maybe something that I would like to show real quick also is because to have the awareness of how much tongue we have in our mouth, 2/3 of our vocal tract is tongue, right? So when I stick out my tongue, you see still so much tongue left on the image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that goes back down here. So really getting on all of it. I have specifics one in the book anyways, more specific ones. I like to use, in this case, it's a tongue depressor. You can also use a pencil. You can use a straw, the end of the straw. You can use 2 fingers, for instance. What it is just to get awareness and guidance, right? Pardon me. Get on the tip of the tongue, either with give yourself resistance, get movement, so you get awareness and movement in your tongue to learn retraction. But also really take your fingers, get in. This is ideally, you do that with the tissue so you don't slip, right? Go along the lower jaw inside, actually, so you don't gag too much, right?
Really under, okay.
Underneath and stretch. And that goes down here to the side, down to the hyoid bone, and then stretch it. This
okay.
really hurts. You will feel that on the root of the tongue, it really hurts. Mm-hmm. But also kind of get this awareness of stretching the tongue each side as much as possible, as long as possible, elongate it every time you do that, and see if it can also start to say, okay, I let the larynx, almost go in the opposite direction, right? To learn to this decoupling, that I say, okay, I get this flexibility in there. That's a big one that I like.
Excellent. Well, let me ask one, unless Nick has any follow-up, I'll ask a final. Nick, do you have it? Because I want to make
Oh,
sure.
I was just gonna do another plug. Chapter 4 of Angelica's book has a ton of exercises for tongue release and stretch that I have used in my studio.
Oh, that's
Okay.
great. Did she cover most of them, or was there a favorite of yours she left out, Nick?
Oh,
I'm putting you on the spot, aren't I just,
Here we go again.
but you knew right where it was in chapter 4, so that's.
yeah, that's all right. You know, I start a lot of my lessons with articulatory stretches anyway, so I go right for the chewing of the tongue as part of it. And then some of my more adventurous students, I really like the ones where they play inside their mouth. Some of them are less apt to do that, but those are kind
Yeah.
of my two that I go to the most.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And do you have your students before they enter the studio then after a while use their time? Is it part of a protocol you give them before?
Yeah, so I have kind of a standard, not warm-up routine because everyone's is going to be different, but a standard set of these are some tongue exercises that I recommend. Actually, a lot of them are yours. And then other ones from Angelica, some jaw exercises, so on and so forth, and say these are things that I'd like you to do before you come so that we're not warming up, but rather we're doing functional exercises.
Yeah.
But if
I,
we're having issues that we need to target, we'll still do them in the studio.
it's amazing every time I do a NATS chat where we're talking about how we are in the studio. It is so different. I'm old enough now, it is so different from when I was younger. We would never have done tongue, at least maybe other people had different experiences, so I can only speak for myself, but I certainly wasn't having teachers guide me through articulatory stretches and or discussing if there was tensions or rigidity or so it's amazing, and I think that's come into play because we're thinking more how we are athletes now, and as
Right.
the warm up has to be not just making sounds but thinking physiologically what are we doing with an instrument that lives within our own body. And so
Yes.
it's your research goes a long way to help us inform with specificity, Angelica. So as my final question, I would say, with all this research and the ultrasound imaging that you've done, is there anything that was revelatory to you that profoundly changed some approach you have? I know this is a bigger question, but is there a nugget you want to make sure voice teachers know about in 2022? Here's where we're at, guys. Here's what we know.
Yes, yes, Kari, thank you for that question, because I think the very first time, and I described that in my preface, when I got in touch with ultrasound and I saw what I'm doing with my tongue, it was mind-boggling, right? I could not believe it. But at the very same time, it was this realization that, oh my gosh, many things I'm doing are not what I thought I do. Many things that I thought that I gave as instructions to do, for instance, the E vowel or k, all those extreme ones, right, were not helpful, were completely wrong. And that was, of course, on one side, oh my gosh, what did I do? I did something that was not helpful. It was passed on to me. It was the knowledge that we had so far. But now with this new tool, with new technology, with new insight, with new knowledge from all sorts of sides, Kari, we all bring something in, and that forms new things and instructions, including that. And I think many things, especially in the tongue, how it moves, the hydrostatic attribute and all of that changes the physiology, and that changes many instructions that we think we have to do with the tongue, and that's the big thing. And I think that is a big turning point now.
Well, it'll be fun to see where you take more of this research, and
Well,
you have article comes out in the spring, correct?
May I just add one thing? It's the interesting question is because spring, I think it's March, Journal of Singing. I'm actually gonna really write about that in this journal, that I will say, okay, what was going on? How did we build our knowledge in the tongue, and where is it now? And I very much touch on that subject.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Nick. First of all, thank you for co-moderating with me, just so I had some support here today. I appreciate your questions and thoughts, and we're getting lots of thank yous. The discount code again is plural20, and you go to Plural Publishing. And thank you, Angelica Nair, for your contribution to our profession and your joyful spirit in teaching us more about the tongue. On December 11th, everybody, will be my next NATS chat, and I will be so pleased to welcome Dr. Neil Bott, who I work in collaboration with at the University of Washington, and he is going to be a look into the future research in laryngology and voice. And having seen part of the presentation he'll share with us, I can tell you it is fantastic from the MD perspective of what's coming down the pike for us in the field of voice medicine. So please join us for December 11th. And in the meantime, those of us in the States, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'll see you in December. Bye-bye, everyone.
Kari, thank you so much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for staying up so late, Angelica.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you. All right, bye-bye, everyone.